Hey everyone, welcome to the ultimate, most disturbing camping encounters caught on camera Iceberg. In this video, we'll see unusual events and odd happenings that will definitely make you think twice about sleeping under the stars. Strange sounds in the middle of the night, eerie figures that appear from nowhere, strange lights, ghosts, and a lot of the times humans, which can appear the most terrifying under these circumstances when you're alone in the woods. So, starting off, the first entry actually only involves humans. No ghosts, no strange occurrences, just humans. And yet it's one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. So let's begin. Enjoy. The woods of Humbult County. It was a quiet June day in 2022, a time when nature's calm should have been a refuge. Megan had chosen this day to escape into the serene woods of Humboldt County, seeking solace in the natural world. Little did she know that the tranquility surrounding her would soon give way to a nightmare. Megan was alone, immersing herself in the quiet beauty of the forest. The gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds formed the perfect backdrop for her solitary retreat. But as she relaxed under the open sky, the silence was abruptly shattered by unfamiliar sounds. Footsteps echoed in the underbrush, a sound that shouldn't have belonged to a peaceful day in nature. In an instant, the calm was replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Before Megan could even process what was happening, a man emerged from the shadows. Clutched in his hand was a broken glass bottle. Her heart pounded as she gripped her belongings in a desperate bid to flee, her instincts screaming that this encounter was anything but ordinary. The intruder's voice cut through the chaos, his words disjointed and strangely apologetic. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, leaving more questions hanging in the air than answers. Megan's relief at surviving was mingled with lingering terror. In the seconds following the encounter, she was left shaking, processing the surreal mix of fear and confusion. That was terrifying, she later recalled, a sentiment that perfectly captured the raw shock of the moment. Not only had a stranger charged at her with a broken bottle, but his fleeting, almost contradictory apology only deepened the mystery of his intentions. She couldn't help but wonder, why was someone whose behavior bordered on the irrational roaming these woods with a broken glass bottle in hand? Was it a case of a disturbed individual seeking attention, or could there have been a darker, more sinister motive behind his actions? Megan managed to escape unharmed that day, but the encounter left a mark. The haunting handwritten trail. On December 19th, 2021, Phil, the host of the YouTube channel Hike Slam, went on what he planned to be a quiet solo hike and an overnight camp along a section of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. At first, his day was light and scenic as he walked through cool autumn woods just before Thanksgiving. The familiar path offered lovely views of rivers, waterfalls, and still pools of water reflecting the calm surroundings. But then things started to feel off. As he went further down the trail, Phil noticed an unusual amount of litter: empty beer cans, plastic, and even handwritten messages on the trash. One piece of trash caught his eye with a creepy message: "Hangman is coming down from the gallows." At first, Phil thought it might just be the ramblings of a local oddball. However, he soon found a dead duck next to a long, messy note filled with odd political rants, Bible quotes, and song lyrics that sent a chill down his spine. It felt too planned, like a warning. The feeling of unease grew when Phil heard the sound of a nearby campfire while hiking. Off the trail, he saw a lone figure who appeared to be camping. A man was sitting near a tarp with a small fire, which made the situation feel even more mysterious and uncomfortable. Later, two women he met on the trail said they felt uneasy too. They mentioned that they had seen the suspicious man and even asked Phil to help them pass by his campsite for safety. Wary of the situation, Phil left that area and set up camp at John's Hollow Shelter, a quiet spot farther from the main road. Although he pitched his tent away from the shelter itself because he was worried about local wildlife, the uneasy feeling stayed with him. As the night grew colder, Phil tried to relax with a simple meal of ramen and a small dessert while sitting near a small fire with a bit of whiskey. Hoping to find comfort in the shelter's logbook, a place where hikers share their thoughts, he flipped through its pages, What he found nearly stopped him in his tracks. The same unsettling handwriting he had seen on trash appeared again, clear and disturbing. The note was a mix of religious quotes, angry political rants, song lyrics, and vague hints about jail and rope left in the woods. He realized that the strange man he had seen earlier must have been around just days before, leaving these creepy messages at different spots. Soon after, another note appeared, this time scrawled on a makeshift tool used to hang food away from animals. It warned, "Watch out for Yeet Mouse. The dead do walk and talk." This final message completed a pattern that suggested someone was hiding along the trail, leaving cryptic warnings and unsettling notes at different campsites. Unable to shake his growing fear, Phil stayed alert as every sound outside his tent seemed louder because of his anxiety. Then, in the dead of night, he heard movement, maybe voices or just footsteps near the shelter. Looking out from his tent, he saw a figure with a headlamp lingering by the shelter. Overcome by fear, Phil quickly decided to pack up quietly, not leaving a single item behind, and slip away into the darkness. He made sure no one followed him as he left, while the headlamp remained at the camp. Even though Phil might never figure out the full story behind the strange writings and the mysterious man on the trail, that night on the Appalachian Trail left him and his viewers with a lasting chill. The Lions' morning standoff. While most campers start their day by boiling water for coffee, outdoorsman and guide Dylan Panos had a very different morning during a camping trip in South Africa's Sabi Sands Game Reserve. Dylan, a wildlife expert used to the African wilderness, had been looking forward to a quiet start with his usual cup of coffee. But when he stepped into his small kitchen area, he wasn't greeted by the sound of a kettle. He heard the deep, rumbling growl of a lion. In a scene that looked like it was straight out of a wildlife documentary, Dylan found himself in a tense standoff. Outside his little kitchen, a male lion was standing guard, while nearby, a lioness lounged casually against the wall of his camp. With a mix of humor and urgency, Dylan spoke to his camera about the absurd situation. Even though he tried to stay calm and confident, it was clear he felt very vulnerable with two top predators only a few feet away. The thin chicken wire fence around his camp suddenly seemed very weak. For several long minutes, Dylan recorded the encounter. The male lion walked back and forth, sometimes making eye contact with him through the barrier. Meanwhile, the lioness mostly ignored the scene and stayed relaxed. The quiet bush, which usually made him feel safe, turned into an area full of tension. After a while, the restless pair wandered back into the bushes, leaving the campsite and its occupant, to finally take a deep breath of relief. Haunted abandoned place on July 5th. On July 5th, 2024, a video was posted by Sarai Tuguia Energetica. In it, she and her team went to explore an old, abandoned place that was said to be haunted by a child's ghost. They had heard stories about this spot and wanted to see if the ghost was real. When they arrived, the area looked dark and lonely, covered with overgrown plants. Sarai, the leader, could feel that something was off. She even called out to see if the spirit was there. At first, the team heard only quiet sounds, whispers, rustling, and even some soft footsteps. They thought it might just be the wind, but soon they realized it was something else. One team member saw a small figure darting quickly behind a broken wall. They quickly moved closer with their cameras ready, but by the time they reached the spot, the figure was gone.
Aquí fue, aquí fue, aquí fue, aquí fue. Pequeño, pequeño. Sarai. Ay, amigo de Sarai. Uy, 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 habló. Habló. No manches. Sarai, volví a mirar al pequeño, no lo miro.
Sarai said she saw something too, but her camera did not capture anything clear. As they kept moving, tension grew. Sarai reacted to a movement near an old building, but again, nothing showed on the camera. The team started to wonder if they were just tricking themselves or if something really paranormal was happening. Then they made a strange find, a worn-out shoe lying alone on the ground. That small, lonely shoe sent chills through everyone. Before they could think much about it, a soft, high-pitched giggle echoed through the dark. The giggle did not sound like a machine or a creaking building. It sounded real and almost pleading. Sarai called out again, asking if the child was there, but the response stopped. Soon after, one of the investigators heard a quiet voice right behind them. They turned around with the cameras rolling, but saw only empty shadows. The air grew very cold, and a heavy feeling of dread filled the place. Then, all of a sudden, they heard what sounded like a child's voice. It was soft, almost like a plea. Everyone on the team heard it at the same time. After that, Sarai tried to talk to the voice again, but it vanished. A burst of static then broke the silence, and in that moment, a final, faint whisper was heard. So chilling that it marked the end of their investigation. Feeling that something was still watching them, Sarai and her team decided to leave. As they drove away, the memory of what happened in that dark place stayed with them. They left wondering if what they saw was truly a ghost, or just their own minds playing tricks on them.
Ahí está, ahí está.
Vente, mi amor, vente. ¿Estás aquí solito?
Oye, está hablando.
Aquí estoy, mi amor, ven.
¿Me escucha?
Pero aquí está, aquí.
Aquí no hay nada.
Pues aquí lo vivo.
A ver, atrás del muro. No, acá no hay nada.
Tampoco. Tito, ven.
Oye, ¿escuchas?
Pequeño.
Aquí fue. Oh. ¿Me escuchaste?
Ven, aquí estamos. ¿Estás aquí? ¿Quién aquí solito? ¿Dónde estás?
The white-robed circle. In this short, yet profoundly eerie clip posted by TikTok user Lauren Burlex, a hiker in the UK captures a scene that would soon send chills down the spines of viewers worldwide. The hiker's journey, part of what appeared to be a solitary camping trip, led them to the summit of a remote hill. As the camera slowly panned the expansive landscape, a strange gathering emerged in the distance. At the center of a clearing, a group of adults clad in pristine white formed a perfect circle. In the middle of this arranged tableau were two children dressed in everyday attire. Overwhelmed by the surreal nature of what was unfolding, the hiker began recording and later shared the short clip online. Many observers quickly identified the group as modern-day druids or practitioners of contemporary Celtic spirituality. They speculated that the circle was part of a peaceful, nature-based ritual, an expression of spiritual practice rather than anything inherently sinister. Despite this explanation, the stark image of robed figures encircling the children stirred feelings of unease for many. The van life nightmare. On November 11, 2022, the YouTube channel Wizard in the Wild, hosted by Graham and Ellie, shared one of their worst experiences during what was meant to be a normal van life trip with their two dogs, Luna and Maya. Known for their calm van life videos, Graham and Ellie were traveling through Scotland in the Peak District when they had to cut their trip short because of problems at home. They headed south and eventually found a highly rated, quiet motorhome stop in the trees in Altrincham near Greater Manchester. The spot was close to the Pennine Way, perfect for dog walks, and seemed like a great place to stay overnight, even though they arrived in the dark because of bad weather and traffic. After a relaxed evening that included an easy dog walk and dinner, the couple settled in for the night. Around 10 p.m., their peaceful routine was broken by a loud car stereo bass that suddenly woke Ellie. Moments later, the music stopped and a big bang shook their camper van. In the chaos, they found that someone had thrown two large house bricks at their van. The passenger side window was completely broken and the front windscreen had several cracks. Rain started pouring in, soaking the interior and turning their once safe van into a mess. Amid the shock, a nearby camper came over with black bags and gorilla tape to help. With the camper's help, Graham managed to make a temporary repair that gave them hope to try and drive home. They drove slowly, no faster than 45 miles per hour, on the rough road, stopping at several service stations to fix their patch-up work. For Graham and Ellie, the damage to the van, which they called Merlin, was only part of the problem. The attack was a random act of vandalism, and it hurt them emotionally too. Ellie, who had thought of Merlin as a safe space, felt like her safe haven had been invaded. The experience left her anxious, and even strangers near their van now made her nervous. Graham said he became jumpy and extra cautious around people. In the days that followed, while repairing Merlin and thinking about what happened, the couple wondered if they should keep wild camping or if it was too risky. Even though insurance eventually helped fix the van, they realized that the emotional scars were much deeper than the physical damage. Their story isn't meant to stop people from enjoying van life or wild camping, but to show that even in places that seem safe, strange and upsetting events can happen unexpectedly. The Scream in the Forest. The Daniel Boone National Forest stretches across Kentucky like an ancient, living memory, dense, rugged, and full of secrets. For the YouTuber Safety Third, this wilderness wasn't just scenery, it was an invitation to explore the forgotten corners of history. Known for venturing into abandoned places, this trip was no different. His goal was to find old hidden mines buried deep within the forest's untouched terrain. What started as a typical solo trek quickly became something far more unsettling. The forest felt calm, welcoming even. Soon he arrived at his first landmark, the abandoned K&T Railroad Bridge. Though worn by time, the bridge still stood proud. Underneath, he found weathered cables and trails that hinted at paths once used, now nearly lost to nature. Further into the woods, the stillness became more pronounced. No voices, no machines, just the soft crunch of leaves and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. Then came the first discovery, a collapsed mine. Its roof had caved in, but the opening still revealed traces of coal seams. Then another find, this time a different cave, intact and open. Cool, dry air drifted from within. The rock was clean, dry, and clearly rich in coal seams. He approached cautiously, filming the untouched interior, marveling at how preserved it all seemed. But then, it happened, a scream. Sharp, human, and terrifying, it cut through the forest like a blade. He froze, heart pounding. The sound echoed off the cave walls and vanished into the trees. He was alone, no other hikers, no camps. The idea that another person might be nearby was deeply unsettling, not just strange but impossible. Was it a cry for help, a warning, or something else entirely? He scanned the woods, no movement, no voices, just silence, deeper and darker than before. He backed away slowly from the cave. The serenity of the forest had shattered. Every branch snap, every rustle in the brush now felt loaded. The sense of being watched was overwhelming. Retracing his steps, he passed the familiar landmarks, the overgrown roads, the quiet trails, the old bridge. But everything felt different now. Finally, he reached the creek and the old bridge. He crossed quickly, not daring to look back. But the scream lingered in his mind. What had he heard? Who was out there? Was it someone in real danger, or was it something far more mysterious? And worst of all, was he still alone? The hunter and the bear. A hunter had climbed a tree to get a better view of the wildlife. He was there to watch and photograph animals in their natural home. But his plan took a sudden turn. A group of bears wandered nearby. Most of them moved on, but one bear chose to stick around. It slowly circled the tree where the hunter was hiding, its eyes fixed on him. Then out of nowhere, the bear lunged. It stayed clinging to the tree, staring right at him. After a tense moment, the bear slowly backed off and disappeared into the wild. It was a close call, a reminder that in nature, danger can be just one step away when you least expect it. The Tarp camping terror. Kev Goes, a YouTube creator known for his love of hiking, fishing, and camping, is used to pushing himself in the wild. He often goes on solo trips deep into nature, using these adventures to connect with the outdoors and challenge his limits. On one overnight tarp camping trip, however, something unexpected and frightening happened. On this trip, Kev biked to a quiet, mossy clearing far inside the forest. With only the essentials in his backpack, he picked a spot between two strong trees to set up his tarp shelter. As the daylight faded, he put up his shelter and started preparing a simple stir-fry meal. Even though the forest was peaceful, Kev was aware that his campsite was just off an ATV trail on public crown land, meaning it wasn't completely away from human activity. While dusk was settling in, Kev heard the loud noise of ATV engines and laughter in the distance. He felt a little safe that the sound might scare off local wildlife, especially bears, since it was spring in Manitoba. Even though the ATV riders were unexpected, he believed they wouldn't be around for long. After dinner, Kev climbed into his sleeping bag under the tarp. The forest slowly became quiet, and the sound of leaves rustling made him feel at ease. But as night grew deeper, every small sound seemed louder. Just after midnight, around 12:30 a.m., that uneasy quiet was shattered by a piercing, high-pitched scream, a sound he'd never heard before. The sound was long, painful, and felt completely unnatural. Frozen in fear, Kev listened as the scream seemed to shift direction with every echo, as if coming from several hidden places at once. Filled with adrenaline, Kev fumbled for his camera in the dark. Even though his hands were shaking, he managed to record part of the strange sounds. When the series of screams finally ended, the silence that came back felt even more heavy and menacing than before. When dawn arrived, the familiar chirps of birds and the rustling of small animals returned, suggesting that everything was back to normal. However, the early morning light could not erase the deep fear left by the previous night. Although nothing was ever seen close to his tarp, the unsettling feeling of a presence in the darkness was clear and hard to ignore. For someone like Kev, who is experienced in the outdoors, encountering something that shakes him to his core is extremely rare and unforgettable. Still feeling shaken, Kev quickly packed up his gear and left the campsite, carrying the heavy memory of a night when the forest, usually a place of adventure and comfort, revealed a much darker side. The scary forest scream. A man went camping with his dog, hoping for a quiet trip in the woods, but things quickly took a strange turn. While hiking along a forest trail, a loud, very scary scream suddenly cut through the quiet. The sound was so frightening that it stopped them in their tracks. It echoed through the trees, making other dogs bark in fear. Even his own dog reacted, whimpering and pulling back as if it knew something was wrong. The man couldn't tell what had scared the dog so much. Then, just as quickly as it started, the video ended without showing what happened next. Overnight in Scotland, two hikers decided to spend a night in Scotland, the night before Halloween. This spot was known to many campers who had shared stories about odd sounds and shadowy figures at night. The area had even attracted other YouTubers, but nothing prepared these two for what they saw. They arrived at a small bothy, a simple shelter with a kitchen area, a main room with a stove, and a place to sleep. Before they settled in, their biggest worry was the coming storm. The wind picked up fast, and the grass and trees were in constant motion. After exploring the area, they came back to the bothy. One of them said it was still early for a beer, so they went for a walk around the nearby woodlands. They needed to collect water for their meals. During the walk, they also talked about the stories of strange happenings in the bothy. One of them thought the place felt a bit odd at night, even if there was no clear bad vibe. Back at the shelter, the wind got even stronger. As they sat down to have a meal, one of the doors slowly creaked open. It paused for a moment and then slammed shut. They wondered if someone had stayed there the night before, because the bothy was very neat when they arrived. They joked and tried to calm themselves, thinking maybe the wind was to blame.
I don't know. I'm gonna put that book away.
Put it back. Well, folks, it's probably about 10 minutes after our ordeal with the spooky door closing over there, and we're trying to like rationalise it. I mean, I don't particularly believe in ghosts, and neither does Mark. But so we're kind of thinking that it might have been just like the backdraft of the wind. I mean, there's a storm going on outside, so.
But soon after, a new sound made them uneasy. A scraping sound like metal dragging on the floor. They watched as a chair started moving on its own.
Yeah, but I still don't believe it was the wind, but it's the only when the wind's blowing that strong outside, and there's no, it's the only rational explanation, even though. Nah, I'm not even looking at that. No, I'm not looking at it. It's moving, right? So, I'm honest, I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go.
This can't be right.
I don't.
I'm not.
It's black in here as well, I can't see a thing.
Fear set in. The room turned dark as they lost track of the lights and cameras. With the storm raging outside, they felt they had no choice but to stick inside. They clung to their beers and wine for comfort, too scared to leave. By morning, they packed their things and left without a second look. This night turned out to be one of the strangest and scariest experiences they'd ever had. The Harwood Forest Mystery. Nestled in the rolling landscapes of Northumberland, England, Harwood Forest stretches endlessly, its dense woodland and winding trails offering quiet solitude to those who seek it. For Damien, the creator behind the YouTube channel Fell Wanderer, this forest wasn't just a retreat. It was a canvas, a place to practice bushcraft, wild camp, and reconnect with nature, all while sharing the experience with his growing audience. But in late 2014, that canvas began to change. What started as peaceful weekend excursions gradually took a darker, more unsettling turn. At first, it was subtle, sounds that didn't belong, faint and distant, footprints where no one should have walked, and a stillness that was too complete, too unnatural. Damien, grounded in logic and experience, dismissed them at first as tricks of the mind or quirks of the woods. But the incidents didn't stop. In fact, they grew more frequent. And Damien, ever the documentarian, did what he always did. He turned his camera toward the unknown. By November 30th, he had compiled a chilling montage of strange encounters, forming what would become one of his most talked about and unsettling uploads to date. Gone was the familiar, serene forest his viewers had come to know. In its place was something else entirely, something that felt foreign, watchful, and wrong. At the heart of it all was a sound, a voice, melodic, haunting, human, but not. It echoed faintly through the trees, always just out of reach. Damien captured it on multiple occasions, and with each instance, it seemed more chilling than the last. The singing wasn't the only disturbance. Sometimes, just as the melody faded into silence, a sudden snap would cut through the air, the sound of a heavy branch breaking, as if something large had moved through the underbrush, unseen. Then came the physical evidence. Footprints began to appear, deep impressions in the earth, far too large to be human. They were fresh, often still damp with morning dew, as though whatever made them had only just passed through. And then there was the most disturbing discovery of all, the sheep. Scattered across different areas of the forest, Damien found carcasses. While not entirely uncommon in the wild, these weren't typical remains. Some of the bodies had been dragged into trees and suspended unnaturally, caught in branches, limbs dangling in ways that defied explanation. Who or what could have done that? Damien documented everything. He took photographs of the tracks, the strange sounds, the eerie scenes in the woods, and compiled them into a video he hoped would shed light on what was happening. But instead of answers, it sparked a flood of new questions. Theories poured in from viewers. Some believed the evidence pointed to something extraordinary, perhaps a primitive, undiscovered hominid still living deep within the forest. Others pushed back with more grounded explanations: natural predators, scavengers, or misinterpretations shaped by isolation. And of course, there were those who dismissed it all, suggesting Damien had simply spent too long alone in the woods. But no one could deny the pattern, the melody, the footprints. Individually, each could be rationalized, but together, they formed a sequence that was harder to ignore. To this day, Damien's Harwood Forest footage remains one of the most debated and spine-tingling entries on his channel, and the mystery behind it all, still unsolved. The lights above the desert. In the rugged deserts of southern Arizona, not far from the Mexican border, a group of backpackers set out on what they thought would be a typical adventure. Their plan was simple: days spent hiking the open landscape and nights gathered under the stars, sharing stories around the fire. The kind of trip where you disconnect from the world and reconnect with the land. At first, it was exactly that. Under the cold night sky, they sat by the fire, the flames crackling softly, casting flickering shadows on the surrounding brush. It was the kind of night that made the world feel paused, still, eternal. But then, something changed. At first it looked like a star, distant and still, but then it moved. The light darted across the sky with unnatural speed. It wasn't drifting like a satellite, it sliced through the atmosphere. A shimmering trail followed it, like a ripple in the air itself, before vanishing just as suddenly as it appeared. The group scrambled to capture it on camera, voices rising with disbelief and adrenaline. The object moved with precision and speed that no plane could match. It was silent, controlled, and then it hovered, for just a moment. Then, as if obeying physics entirely its own, it blinked out of existence. We just saw the craziest unidentified flying object ever. It was right there, then all the way over there, and then it was gone. There was no sound, no trail of smoke, no logical explanation. The group stood stunned, staring at the empty space where the light had vanished. One of the backpackers, once a skeptic, now questioned everything he believed about what was possible. Was it a UFO, some classified military tech, or something else? That brief sighting had transformed the entire trip. What had begun as a relaxing night in the wilderness had become something much larger, a brush with the unknown. As the fire burned low and the stars kept watch above, the group sat huddled. Storm Camp on the mountain. Good Bloke Outdoors is a YouTube channel focused on solo camping and survival in extreme conditions. In this video, he takes on one of his most brutal wild camping trips yet, facing freezing temperatures, driving rain, and wind gusts over 60 miles per hour. The journey begins with a long and difficult hike up a mountain. As he gains elevation, the wind grows stronger, making every step a battle. At one point, he struggles just to open a gate. Visibility drops to almost nothing, with thick fog and relentless rain swallowing the trail. Even for someone experienced in solo camping, this hike is pushing him to his limit. As he nears the summit, the wind howls through the valleys, creating an eerie and relentless roar. Eventually, he spots the summit marker, a small but welcome relief in the middle of chaos. There's no time to celebrate, though. He has to find a campsite, fast. He chooses a spot near a stone wall that offers some shelter from the wind and quickly begins setting up. Using heavy-duty delta pegs, he secures his tent against the roaring gusts, careful with every step on the soaked and unstable ground. Once the tent is up, he changes out of his wet clothes, trying his best to keep the inside of the tent dry. Outside, the storm continues without pause. The tent shudders in the wind, the fabric rattling so loudly it's hard to think. He settles in with layers of warm clothes and a sleeping bag. He passes the time watching videos on his phone, trying to tune out the storm. Eventually, he cooks dinner, salmon and broccoli, on his small camping stove. It's a tough task in the wind, but he manages, joking about the burnt residue still stuck to the pan from a previous trip. The salmon's a bit overdone, but in weather like this, any hot meal is a win. After eating, he checks his gear, making sure nothing will blow away in the night. He considers going outside to check the pegs again, but decides against it. The wind is just too dangerous. As the hours drag on, he tries to sleep, layering up and even putting on headphones to block out the sound. But each gust hits the tent like a wave, shaking it to its core. It's a night of endurance, not rest. By 7 a.m., with no sign of the storm letting up, he begins to pack up. It's a slow and careful process. Visibility is still low, and every movement has to be deliberate to avoid losing gear to the wind. Then, something unexpected. He spots other hikers trying to make their way up the mountain in the same brutal conditions. Shocked, he wishes them luck, knowing firsthand just how dangerous it is. Finally, after a long, tense descent, he makes it back to his car. The relief is immediate. The storm may not have broken, but he did what he came to do. It was one of the harshest nights he's ever spent in the wild. But it was also a success, a true test of resilience and preparation. He ends the video with a message. Sometimes pushing yourself to the limit is what makes the best adventures. Late night hike. Two explorers set out on a late night hike. One of them had been to this area before and said he was once stalked by a huge shadow in the dark. That memory made him even more cautious, and tonight they would face something even scarier. They started their hike with only their flashlights to guide them through the pitch-black forest. As they walked, the tension grew. Soon, while crossing an old bridge, the camera caught a strange pair of eyes shining in the distance.
Are you not seeing this? What is that?
While they walked deeper into the forest, they heard a sudden crash from the trees. It sounded like something was falling, and at the same time, one of them mentioned that he had heard a sound coming from the area where they had set up their fire a moment ago. They even joked that it might have been a small animal or the wind, but something didn't feel right. As they continued, things started to get worse. Someone seemed to throw an object, and then a tall figure in a cloak appeared in the dark. The figure just stood there watching them.
Yeah, somebody threw something. That's weird. What the hell is that? What the? I'm out of here. Go!
The explorers started running, not stopping to see what was following them. They kept glancing back as they hurried through the dark forest. The deeper they ran, the more lost they became. After what felt like an endless chase, they finally found a way out. They managed to escape unharmed, but were very shaken. In the end, they were left with one big question. Who or what was that following them in the dark? Personally, I think it's a good thing they didn't find out. Tense encounter at the abandoned manor. This unsettling video comes from Urbex Mooch, a channel that explores old abandoned places. On March 6, 2015, Mooch and his friends went to document an old manor house that had been left to fall apart for more than 30 years. The building was in complete disrepair, shattered windows, crumbling walls, and an overgrown outside. With cameras in hand, they went past a barbed wire fence and squeezed through a gap in the boarded-up door. Inside, they marveled at the eerie silence and took photos of the decayed remains. But their quiet exploration didn't last long. Out of nowhere, a deep, firm voice broke the silence.
Why are you coming to my land on a Saturday morning?
Just take some photos.
Should I come to your house and smash the windows in and take some photos? Can't you eat and keep house?
I know, yeah. Sorry, we didn't mean any harm.
You damaged my fence, you damaged that.
I think it was already open, the fence.
It's not open.
No, that hole there. Alright.
The property owner was angry that Mooch and his friend had trespassed. They tried to explain that they only wanted to take photos and didn't mean any harm. However, the owner was not willing to listen. His anger grew, and he even threatened to call the police. telling them to stay put until law enforcement arrived. When Mooch tried to climb over a nearby fence to escape, another person blocked his way. The owner kept insisting they stay and warned that if they tried to leave and got hurt, he would be held responsible. Ironically, he had pushed them down the fence, which could have easily injured them. They were trapped inside the abandoned house against the property owner's will. The heated argument continued as the owner demanded that they remain where they were.
You can't do that.
You can't come in my house. Okay? Don't tell me the law. You earned my tax today and keep out of my house.
Well, we're sorry, we didn't mean any, Well, we're only taking photos.
In the end, Mooch and his friend eventually managed to get out safely. Later, they confirmed that all charges were dropped because the house had been abandoned for decades. The Blue Mountains encounter. The Blue Mountains of Australia are a place of quiet majesty, where rivers carve through rugged terrain, eucalyptus trees stretch toward the sky, and the silence feels ancient, untouched. For Scotty, the adventurer behind the YouTube channel Scotty's Gone Walkabout, it was the perfect escape, a solo camping and fly fishing trip deep into the bush. Just him, his gear, and the wild. At first, the journey was like any other. He arrived early, greeted by the crisp spring air, rich with the scent of earth and eucalyptus. The river was clear and lazy, its surface glinting in the sunlight as it babbled over smooth stones. Birds chirped overhead, insects hummed in the warm air. It was everything Scotty loved about the outdoors. This was what he'd come for: fishing, solitude, peace. He hiked downstream, casting his line into pools and eddies, hoping for trout. The trout never came, but carp were abundant. Though they weren't what he was after, still the day was far from wasted. He came upon a beautiful bend in the river, where tall trees cast shifting shadows across the water, and thick roots wove intricate patterns along the bank. It was raw, pure Australia. But as the sun dipped toward the horizon, that peace began to shift. He needed to find a campsite before dark. After some searching, he stumbled upon a wide grassy clearing near a large water hole. It looked ideal, flat, quiet, perfectly nestled in the landscape, almost too perfect. Something about it gave him pause. The silence was heavier. The trees felt closer, like they were leaning in, watching. Scotty couldn't put his finger on it, but his instincts whispered caution. So he moved on. Further upstream, he found another spot. Less picturesque, but something about it felt safer. He set up camp, built a small fire, cooked dinner, and watched the stars appear in the night sky. The unease melted away, replaced once again by the familiar calm of the bush, for a while. Later that night, long after the fire had burned low and Scotty had crawled into his tent, the silence broke. At first, it was subtle, a rustle in the leaves, maybe a distant branch snapping. He didn't panic. The Australian bush is alive after dark. Possums, kangaroos, maybe a wombat sniffing around. But the sounds didn't fade. They grew louder, more deliberate, rhythmic, footsteps, slow, heavy, circling the tent.
You guys hear that? That just... What is that? That just gave me the biggest chills.
Scotty froze. His breath caught in his throat. Every instinct in his body told him something wasn't right. He reached quietly for his flashlight, but didn't turn it on. Some part of him didn't want to see what was out there. The footsteps stopped, right outside. He lay motionless, the thin nylon wall of the tent the only thing separating him from whatever waited beyond. A long moment passed. Then the steps resumed, retreating slowly, fading back into the darkness of the trees. Scotty didn't sleep. He barely moved, just lay there, clutching his knife, listening to the sounds of the bush and his own heartbeat. When dawn finally came, it came slowly. He stepped out of the tent into a forest that looked perfectly normal. Ordinary. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing out of place. But the feeling that something had been there watching clung to him. He packed up his gear and began the long hike back through a landscape that now felt subtly altered. To this day, Scotty never found an answer to what visited his camp that night. Was it a person? An animal? Bear's scariest camping night. On February 27th, 2025, a YouTuber known as Bear decided to camp alone in an area called Shadow Figure Forest. This place is known for strange sightings, odd sounds, and even some reports of Bigfoot. Bear's goal was to explore the forest, check out some large tree structures with twisted branches that look like nests, and then spend the night by himself. As the sun set, he noticed that the long shadows from the trees made the forest look even stranger. While he was walking around, Bear began to feel uneasy, like someone was watching him. Just before it got completely dark, he saw a shadow move behind a tree, barely caught by his flashlight. Not long after, he heard a faint whistle echo through the trees. The sound was soft but clear, almost like someone or something was replying to him. As darkness set in, Bear decided to knock on the trees, something that Bigfoot researchers sometimes do to see if they get a response. Almost immediately, he heard a deep guttural growl coming from deep in the forest. His heart started to race as he realized he was truly alone with something unknown. Later, he discovered something strange in his footage. At one point, a dark, human-like figure could be seen moving in the reflection of water. At another moment, something swung from a tree in a way that felt completely unnatural. The fear only increased as Bear began packing up his gear. Every few steps, he could hear leaves crunching behind him, as if someone was following him. Then he heard a loud snapping sound and a growl that was much closer than before. With his survival instincts kicking in, Bear jumped into his truck and drove away as fast as he could. In the end, between the unexplained whistles, shadow figures, eerie reflections, and that constant feeling of being watched, this turned out to be his scariest night camping alone. A kayak escape. The Nerang River, known for its tranquil waters and lush scenic beauty, seemed like the perfect escape for Josiah, the creator behind Joe's Gone Fishing. Armed with his kayak, his gear, and a GoPro, he set off for what he hoped would be a peaceful day of casting lines and quiet exploration. His plan was simple: paddle toward the river's mouth, stop at promising spots, and try his luck with his favorite lures. And for a while, the day lived up to the promise. The sun cast a warm glow over the water, the kayak glided smoothly, and the only sounds were birds, wind, and the soft splash of paddling. Josiah was in his element. He stopped near a bridge that looked promising: shade, structure, current, the kind of place fish love to hide. He cast his line, hopeful. But just as the calm started to settle in, the peace shattered. The distant buzz of an engine grew louder. Then voices, laughing and yelling. A group of teenagers sped toward him in a motorized boat, tearing through the calm like they owned the river. Without warning, they began circling Josiah's kayak, revving their engine and spraying water at him. Their taunts grew louder, from annoying to outright hostile. Josiah tried to stay calm, tried to keep his gear dry, tried not to react. Eventually, the teens peeled off. Soaked and frustrated, Josiah pressed on, determined not to let them ruin his trip. Further downriver, he came across two young fishermen on a pontoon. He told them about the run-in. They weren't surprised. Yeah, they hang out in the cove a lot. It's kind of their spot. Best to steer clear. Josiah took the advice seriously. He paddled along the opposite bank, giving the trouble zone a wide berth. And for a brief stretch, the river returned to what it was supposed to be: quiet, peaceful, still. But it didn't last. From across the water, the teens spotted him again, and this time they came back faster, louder, bolder. Once again they circled him, shouting and spraying water. This time Josiah realized he had to get away. Scanning the shoreline, he spotted a narrow creek, its entrance choked with logs and debris. A perfect escape, one their boat couldn't follow. He paddled fast, slipping into the narrow waterway. Branches scraped overhead, fallen logs narrowed the path. But finally, he was in, and just like that, the noise vanished. Inside the creek, the water calmed. The trees pressed in like guardians. By the time Josiah made it back to the launch point, the river was quiet again. The teens were gone, the sky had shifted, and so had he. He hadn't caught a single fish, but he'd captured everything else, on camera, in memory, in hard-earned patience. The Randonautica torch encounter. When it comes to exploring the unknown, few people dive in quite like Wayne, better known online as Wayne the Bearded Explorer. Alongside his friend DMO, Wayne regularly uses the app Randonautica, a strange little tool that generates random coordinates based on the user's chosen intention. It's been called a gateway to the bizarre, a magnet for the unexpected, and for Wayne and DMO, it had certainly delivered oddities before, but nothing quite like this night. It was August 2024, and the intention they chose came from a viewer. It sounded ridiculous, and they laughed it off as just another strange internet joke. Still, they typed it in, and the app led them to a wooded area near a quiet playground. It seemed harmless enough. They grabbed their gear, flashlights in hand, though DMO only had a tiny backup light, and followed a narrow path into the trees. At first, the mood was lighthearted. They joked about a drunk guy they'd passed earlier, laughed at a dirty sock and an abandoned jumper near the trail, and even spotted something that looked like a fish glinting in the beam of a torch. Just another weird little night out exploring. But then, the air changed. The deeper they went, the quieter it got. The laughter faded. The distant sounds of traffic slipped away, swallowed by the thickening trees. Then, suddenly, a voice.
No. Work it. Oh, this way. Signals. Go.
It cut through the stillness like a blade, harsh, close, unmistakably human. Wayne and DMO froze, flashlights whipping through the dark in all directions. But there was no one there, no movement, just silence again. They didn't wait to ask questions. Panic took over as they turned and ran, feet pounding down the narrow path. The woods felt tighter, darker, like they were closing in. When they finally reached the car, breathless and shaking, they thought it was over. But something was waiting for them. 2 items, placed carefully on the hood, a stick and a torch. At first it just seemed odd, but then Wayne took a closer look and stopped cold. It was his torch, the one he'd lost a week earlier during a different exploration. Same scratches, same worn handle, but now it was oily, smudged. DMO noticed what looked like long finger marks running down the side. The stick, just an ordinary stick, but set down with purpose. This wasn't some random coincidence. Someone had found Wayne's lost gear, kept it, and brought it back. Not kindly, not anonymously, deliberately, with a message. They had been followed, watched, and whoever it was knew exactly who they were. Back in the car, they locked the doors and sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The night had gone from quirky and strange to something far darker, far more personal. Later, Wayne reviewed the footage. The voice was there, captured clearly, but no face, no movement, no shape in the shadows, just the threat and the echo of something unseen. He uploaded the video and the theories poured in. Maybe it was a prank, maybe a stalker, maybe something else entirely, but none of the explanations felt right, and none of them could explain the returned torch. Overnight at Point Pleasant. On July 5th, 2024, Dee's Dark Adventures returned to Point Pleasant for an overnight camping trip. Dee and his team hoped to find proof of the strange things people have reported in this area. From the start, the night quickly turned disturbing. Right away, unusual events began. A red light orb appeared on Dee's camera while she was by a tree with an X marked on it. Soon after, they heard strange sounds, low vibrations, whispers, and even what sounded like a wolf's howl. But wolves are not known to be in this area, and that put everyone on edge. Dee decided to go back to a spot where a white figure had been seen during a previous trip. As they got closer, a whistling noise cut through the silence. One of the team members even saw a light flash in the trees. The sounds grew louder, and soon the sound of footsteps in the dry leaves made Dee feel very alone and scared. As the team moved further into the area, they came across a very odd sight. Clothing scattered all over the forest floor. Shirts, pants, and other items lay abandoned, and no one knew who had left them there. The feeling of being watched grew stronger when Dee's camera caught a glimpse of glowing eyes in the dark. Then they heard a loud snap like a tree branch breaking. At that moment, the tree frogs that had been croaking suddenly went quiet, a sign that something was very wrong. Dee also noticed a perfect triangle made of broken branches on the ground. They later learned that these triangle shapes have been linked to strange encounters in the woods. Not long after, they found an old, abandoned building with its door slightly open. But something was off. The door had been open before, but now it was closed on its own. This only made the team feel more unsafe. Deciding it was time to leave, they hurried back to their vehicle. Even as they drove away, they could feel that something was still watching them from the trees. Dee later said that between the strange voices, eerie whistles, odd howls, and the constant feeling of being followed, it was clear that something unnatural was out there. A chilling solo camping trip with Yeti. Mandog Wild is a YouTube channel that shows outdoor survival, wild camping, and adventures in remote places. On November 15, 2024, the host set out on a solo tent camping trip with his dog, Yeti. What began as a normal exploration quickly turned unsettling. The journey started with a tough hike. The host had to push through steep slopes and thick bushes full of dangerous crown of thorns. He managed to reach an area with caves he had seen from afar. Unfortunately, when he got closer, the caves turned out to be small and unimpressive, hardly worth the effort. Feeling tired, he headed back to his campsite. He noticed that Yeti, who was usually energetic, was acting strangely calm. Once at camp, the host began checking out the area. He spotted odd white mineral lines or veins on the rocks that shined in the sunlight. He even asked his viewers to help him figure out what they might be. As the sun set, everything grew silent. There were no birds or insects. The forest felt lifeless and eerie. Yeti stayed close to the tent instead of exploring like she normally would. The host tried to put the strange feeling aside, believing it was just the cold night. But then things took a turn. Around the time of the full moon, he began to hear footsteps outside his tent. At first, he thought it was an animal, but the steps were slow, deliberate, and clearly made by a person. He looked for signs of movement, but saw nothing in the bright moonlight. Strangely, Yeti did not react at all, which was not like her at all. After a few tense moments, the footsteps stopped and all went quiet. The host opened the tent to see if anyone was there, but the area was empty and there were no footprints. He tried to convince himself that it was his imagination or a natural sound distorted by the silence of the night, and he eventually fell asleep. Come morning, the host stepped outside to look for any sign of what happened during the night. There were no tracks or any clear evidence that someone had been there. Yeti, however, continued to act oddly by digging holes and avoiding her breakfast, almost as if she sensed something and chose to ignore it. Reflecting on the night, the host admitted that he had seen and heard things that felt too real to ignore. Though he has spent many years camping in remote places and seen strange events before, this night felt different. The deliberate footsteps, the sudden quiet, and the unusual behavior of his dog left him with an uneasy feeling that the experience would stay with him for a long time. The Viking tomb camper. Rob from the channel Rob Call Nature is known for visiting remote, off-grid locations that most people only see on satellite maps. His videos show beautiful nature, outdoor survival skills, and solo camping in quiet settings. But on March 22, 2025, one of his trips turned unexpectedly spooky. Rob started by looking through Google Earth to find interesting spots to camp. In the middle of a Finnish forest, he saw a spot labeled Viking Tomb with just one blurry photo and no details. Intrigued by the mystery, he decided to find it, camp next to it, and record his experience. He parked on an empty logging road, the nearest point to the site, and immediately notices something strange. A car passed by, slowed down, and seemed to be watching him. A few minutes later, the car came around again, and this time, the driver seemed to take a picture of his license plate.
That's weird. Why would they do that? That really bothered me. 'Cause I don't know why they would do that. But I guess it's just a way to get around the rules. But I don't know why they would do that. That really bothered me. Why would they do that? That's weird. Why would they do that? 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 Why would they take pictures of my car?
That really bothered me. Why would someone take pictures of my car? Shrugging off his worry, Rob grabbed his gear and walked west into the forest. The woods were thick and confusing. He got lost a few times, and at one point he startled a deer that ran away. Finally, he found the tomb, a large, ancient stone mound that had been robbed long ago, but still looked eerie and impressive. As the sun went down and the temperature dropped, Rob set up his minimal camp right next to the site. He used a hammock under a tarp for shelter. Even though the forecast said it would be -4 degrees Celsius, he was ready with a foam pad, extra clothing, a wool blanket, and hand warmers. He ate a cold meal and watched a movie on his phone, but the calm didn't last. Around 11 p.m., after lying still for hours, the cold became unbearable. Despite his gear, the chill made his hands go numb. With no sign of the cold letting up, Rob decided it was time to leave early.
This shelter, even though I'm all tucked in and I've got hand warmers, 4 of them, I just can't seem to get warm, so I'm just laying here, shivering. I'm going to pull the plug on this one. Am I hypothermic? No, but it's really uncomfortably cold. We are going to get up, back up, and hike out in the night.
On his way back to the car, the forest felt different. It wasn't just cold anymore. There was an unsettling feeling, as if someone was watching him. When he finally reached his car, he noticed something that made him even more uneasy. There were fresh footprints in the snow next to the car on the passenger side, an area he never walked by.
In my car, I knew there was something off. These are not my footprints.
These are not my footprints. Someone else was here. Rob was now sure that the person who had taken a picture of his car earlier had come back. He couldn't tell if it was just out of curiosity or something more disturbing. What stayed with him wasn't the ancient tomb or the freezing weather. It was the eerie feeling that someone had been quietly watching him from the dark woods.